Well, good afternoon and welcome. I think this Council has had a number of useful discussions and some measured and good progress has been made. Four issues really: the EU budget, the British presidency of the G8, the European economy and the issue of Syria. I'll just say a word about each. On the EU budget, I remain of the view that we did a good deal. We did a really important deal for the future of the EU budget. We cut the limit of the EU credit card, and that limit is going to stay cut. There should be no change to the ceiling that was agreed, and the Council is clear about this. Of course, the European Parliament will have points it wants to make, will have ideas it wants to put forward, will have flexibility it wants to suggest, but the ceiling is the ceiling. The rebate is the rebate, and they aren't going to change. Second, the G8. It was an opportunity for me to spell out the agenda that we'll be pursuing at Knockern in Northern Ireland in June. Three key economic issues on tax, transparency and trade. On tax, I do think it's important that we have international cooperation to stop tax evasion and to deal with aggressive tax avoidance. And that is the agenda we'll be pushing at the G8, and obviously it applies in the G20 and the OECD as well. Transparency, this is important because we want to make sure that when developing countries discover oil, gas, mineral deposits, we want to make sure that these are a blessing and not a curse. And too often in the past they've proved to be a curse. And I think the most important thing we can do there is greater transparency for governments, greater transparency for companies, greater transparency about laws and rules. And I think the G8 can give a lead there. The third issue is trade. The third T of the three is trade. As you know, the trade deals that are on the table simply for the European Union would add 2% to European Union GDP and help create 2 million jobs. But of course, trade shouldn't simply be an issue for the rich men's club of the world. It should also be an issue where we see an expansion of trade deals between developing countries and within developing continents, particularly Africa, where there are still many complex rules and bureaucracy that stop it achieving its full rate of growth. Added to those three T's of tax, transparency and trade, we'll also have a discussion, and I hope some progress, on issues related to terrorism, how we close down the ungoverned spaces, how we confront the poisonous narrative that the terrorists feed off, how we work together to improve security cooperation right across North Africa, and also how we deal with the problems raised by hostage taking. So that is an issue I want us to pursue and discuss at the G8. Third point to make is in terms of progress on European economic growth. Last night's discussion was useful. Chancellor Merkel, President Hollande and I achieved, I think, an important breakthrough, which is this. The European Commission has been looking at the greatest burdens identified by small and medium-sized enterprises. And remember, it is small and medium-sized enterprises that have provided 85% of the new jobs in the European Union over the last decade. They have identified 10 key areas, the SMEs, where they want burdens reduced, and we have now mandated the Commission to set out in June how they're going to reduce those burdens. They've also, by the autumn, got to produce a list of unnecessary European Union rules that need to be reversed. As you know, I've spoken about the fact we are involved in a global race, a race where we need to compete and succeed. We need a more flexible, a more open, a more competitive Europe. That was the theme of my speech about Europe. I believe we're beginning to achieve some of those things because we need a Europe that doesn't over-regulate. In fact, we need a Europe that starts to take regulation off. We need the ratchet to go in the other direction. And with the Commission's help, we are now starting to see some progress on that front in the two ways that I identified. Finally, on Syria. It is worth reflecting that we are 2 years into this dreadful conflict. There are probably over 70,000 people who've lost their lives, and I think we have to be frank that what the international community has done so far Of course, it has helped in terms of humanitarian assistance, and I'm proud of the role that Britain has played there. Of course, it has helped to put pressure on the regime, and I'm proud of what we've done at the UN and here at the EU, but it hasn't overall worked in terms of stopping this conflict and achieving transition in Syria. I think that Foreign Secretary William Hague achieved an excellent outcome last week when he changed the rules so that it is possible to give technical assistance to the Syrian opposition, because we want to help them in what they're doing. We want to shape them in what they're doing in order to help provide a better outcome. But Francois Hollande and I have agreed it is also right to look at further changes in terms of the arms embargo, because at the moment it is basically still treating the Syrian regime in a pretty similar way to the Syrian opposition. This will be debated by Foreign Office of Ministers, but I think it is worth just taking on for a moment the two arguments that the opponents of change make. The first is that what is required in Syria is a political solution, not a military solution. Well, of course people want a political solution. Of course I want a political solution. But this is not an either-or situation. I think, in fact, we're more likely to see political progress if actually people can see that the Syrian opposition, which we have now recognized, that we are working with, is a credible and strengthening and growing force. The second argument people make is, of course, if you change the rules under the arms embargo, the arms will go to the wrong people. To which my answer is, that is what has happened already. And actually it's important for countries like Britain, France, working with the Americans, working with other allies in the Gulf to help the opposition, to work with the opposition, to shape the opposition, and to make sure that it is those parts of the opposition that support a democratic and pluralistic Syria where minorities are properly protected, that those are the organisations getting our help and getting our assistance. So President Hollande and I made some of these arguments in the discussion this morning. The foreign ministers will meet, and I hope further progress will be made. But in the end, this is not about process. In the end, this is about really working out everything we can do to help achieve a transition at the top in Syria, but also to help shape and work with the Syrian opposition, who we now properly and rightfully recognise. That was all I wanted to say. Happy to take some questions. John Craig from Sky News.